All right, Niall, what's in your notes today?
Well, Robbie, last night President Trump went to Pennsylvania to give a speech. The word in advance of that speech was that it would address the concerns that so many Americans have over the cost of living. But before the president began this supposed effort to reconnect with everyday folks and their money worries, he limbered up by giving an interview to Politico, and he spoke with Dasha Burns. There weren't many signs that he feels people's pain. Let's watch.
Economy, sir, here at home, and I wonder what grade you would give your
A+.
economy. A+.
Yeah, A++++++.
Well, it's interesting.
Now, of course, this kind of braggadociousness will raise a smile with some. Donald Trump, it would be fair to say, has never been overly encumbered by modesty. But the kind of hyperbole that could maybe be seen as amusing when the Trump of the 1980s boasted about his buildings or his casinos is a lot less amusing when he's president and millions of Americans are in real economic distress. It wasn't as if Trump's Politico interview was a one-off. He seemed extremely reluctant last week to acknowledge there is any problem at all with prices. And that attitude resulted in him handing this gift to Democrats.
But the word affordability is a Democrat scam. They say it and then they go into the next subject. And everyone thinks, oh, they had lower prices. No, they had the worst inflation in the history of our country.
Now, before we get to the scam part of that comment, a brief fact check, because those are always useful when a president invents false facts as easily and as often as Trump does. Inflation under Joe Biden was certainly high, but it was not close to the highest inflation in the history of the United States. Higher inflation was seen in the early 1980s and in 1974 and just after the Second World War. More to the point, inflation under Biden had come down roughly 2/3 by January of this year, from a peak of 9.1% to 3%. January is, of course, when Trump took office, and inflation is unchanged since then. The most recent figures we have from September show it's still at 3%. All of that is bad news for a president who won last year's election, in part on his promises to bring prices down fast, on day one, as he sometimes said. But the scam comment we just watched was an even bigger political problem, because even for Trump, it's politically just dumb to tell voters to disbelieve what they're seeing and feeling every day of their lives. In Pennsylvania last night, Trump came at least a bit closer than he normally does to admitting an error on that point. Sort of. Let's watch.
And the word affordability is the exact same thing. And I can't say affordability hoax because I agree the prices were too high, so I can't go to hoax because they'll misconstrue that. But they use the word affordability, and that's their only word. They say affordability, and everyone says, oh, that must mean Trump has high prices. No, our prices are coming down tremendously.
Once again, prices are not coming down tremendously or otherwise. Those latest figures for September showed the unadjusted price of beef up year on year by almost 15%, coffee by almost 19%, bananas by almost 7%. And, by the way, rent, usually the biggest expense for the many millions of Americans who don't own their own homes, was up 3.4%. Trump's blame Biden strategy seems to be running out of steam fast as well. A Fox News poll last month asked registered voters whether Biden or Trump is more responsible for the state of the economy. 62% said Trump, while just 32% said Biden. And that same Fox poll had even worse news for the president. It asked whether people felt they had been personally helped or hurt by Trump's economic policies. Only 15%, 1-5, said they had been helped. More than 3 times as many, 46%, said they had been hurt. Does Trump have a plan? That's unclear. Earlier this week, he announced a $12 billion bailout for farmers. That is, 12 billion taxpayer dollars handed over to ease a problem that was caused in large part by Trump's own tariff policies. But never fear, if tariff pressures ramp up further, the president has a belt tightening plan. Let's hear more about that.
You can give up certain products. You can give up pencils. Because under the China policy, you know, every child can get 37 pencils. They only need one or two, you know. They don't need that many. But you always need steel.
Trump's bumper sticker, "I don't feel your pain, but buy fewer pencils." I'm not really sure that that's the slogan many Republicans want to run on when they face an angry nation in next year's midterms.
Ooh, I had not seen that clip yet of the "you don't need that many choices of pencils."
Yeah.
Oh, that is a real bad message in my view. Frankly, it's a message I associate with like Bernie Sanders and the left.
Supply controls, state controls.
Limits, well, you don't need more choices for, was it shaving cream or whatever that came up? That's what some people on the very hard left say, that capitalism is creating all these choices and we don't need that, and it's confusing and disorienting. So leave that talking point behind. I agree with this notes of yours.
There we go. Wonders will never cease, Robbie. Happens once in a while.
Topic where we're on the same page, indeed. Bailing out farmers, I hate this. Making their situation worse with the tariffs and then giving them a bailout. Just don't do the tariffs in the first place and you wouldn't need to do the bailout. Bailouts are bad. The tariffs are bad. He knows he can't, I'm glad he recognizes he can't call affordability crisis a hoax because affordability is not good enough. But yes, Democrats are talking about it. To defang this talking point, you're going to need to do more. It's been a year. You get a year when you win an election. You've had a year. The inflation is better, but it's not fixed, and the prices are still bad. And it's just as clear as day that the tariffs, if you had not done the tariffs are going to tank the rest of the agenda. Because Republicans lost with the Miami. We had these
Miami mayoral
elections last
night.
Miami mayoral election for the first time in 30 years. We know exactly what the problem is. The problem is that it's not necessarily that everyone is swapping back to the Democratic Party, but Trump can't turn out when he's not on the ballot. His converted, less likely to vote people, and also there are swing voters out there who believed what Trump was going to do for the economy, particularly young people, I think. And have not been sold. And it's the tariffs. It's not just the tariffs, but that's the big one, where he has charged full steam ahead with a policy that everyone who knows anything about economics advised was going to be a problem. And here we are.
I think that point about the uncommitted or swing voters politically is a very important one because, look, obviously we talk about Trump almost every day on here. For a massive swathe of the population, their views of him are very, very fixed, be that positively or negatively.
And that's the kind of people we interact with in our daily lives as media reporters. So it's funny to picture this vast mass of people who are like, I could go either way on Donald Trump, but they exist and they decide the election.
Right, and they often decide their votes on economic conditions, which is, of course, a completely valid grounds to decide those
100%.
on. And the inflation that had taken place under Biden obviously hurt him, and then, of course, by extension, Kamala Harris, when she took over the ticket in those circumstances. So I think that for people who voted for Trump because they believed he would improve their economic lives, he would put more money in their pockets. That looks a very dodgy bet now. And yes, he is constitutionally prohibited, whatever Steve Bannon might think, about running for a third term. But I do think it has the capacity to hurt Republicans generally in elections.
Yeah, it's so the tariffs. I actually saw Elizabeth Warren yesterday tweet something about how shoe prices have gone up massively, and how she, of course, for her agenda, it has to be because there's been consolidation in the shoe industry.
Shoeopolis.
And I looked it up a little bit. No, it's entirely due to the tariffs. That's the vast majority, a huge, massive increase in shoe prices. That is true, what she said, but the reason is just the tariffs. We got Republicans, Trump, someone to get to him, we got to fix the tariffs. The whole administration, the whole agenda will collapse if they don't get sane on this policy.
We were just admiring our studio manager, Kit's enormously flamboyant footwear today. We must ask her whether tariffs have hit footwear prices.
We'll have to ask about the price of that. Good idea.
CBS has selected a new anchor for their evening news show, and it's someone who also caught Barry Weiss's eye before. Stay with us for that.